The morning Colton Vale walked into federal bankruptcy court. He was still wearing the watch that cost more than most people's cars. He straightened his collar in the glass door's reflection, adjusted the cufflinks, and pushed inside wearing the face of a man who had spent 15 years performing wealth for people who never quite believed it. He did not see her name on the docket. Nobody warned him. The bailiff called the room to order, and Colton moved toward his seat with his attorney at his side, already rehearsing the speech they had spent 3 weeks crafting: measured regret, technical language, a careful pivot away from blame. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. Then the chamber door opened behind the bench, and Nahtales Vale, formerly Nahtales Obi, the woman he had left in a furnished apartment in Cleveland, with 2 bags of her belongings, and a voice note explaining that their marriage, no longer aligned with his trajectory, walked in wearing judicial robes. Colton's attorney said something. Colton did not hear it. The courtroom rose. Judge Nahtales Obi took her seat, set down her water glass, opened the case file, and looked up. Their eyes met across 20 feet of federal courtroom air. She did not flinch. She did not smile. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a chart, precise, unhurried, already knowing what she is about to find. Colton's hands, resting on the table, began to sweat. This is where a man who had built everything on the bodies of people who trusted him finally ran out of exits. But to understand what happened in that courtroom, you have to understand what he did to get there and what she did to survive it. Colton Vale grew up in Akron, Ohio, in a house where the heat cut out in February and his mother stretched 1 chicken across 4 meals. He was smart. He was relentless. And from the time he was 19 years old, he understood one brutal truth about the world he wanted to enter. Perception was currency, and he was willing to go into debt to buy it. He met Nahtales during his 2nd year at Ohio State. She was pre-law. He was an economics major who spent more time networking than studying. She was the kind of woman who made people feel seen, warm, direct, unbothered by the performance he showed most people. She saw through the performance from the first conversation, and liked what was underneath anyway. They married at 26. She worked 2 jobs while he launched his first startup. She co-signed the apartment lease when his credit was too thin. She drove him to pitch meetings, sat in parking lots reading case law while he shook hands inside with men who would eventually fund him. She was the scaffolding no one photographs once the building goes up. By 32, Colton had raised $2 million in seed funding for a fintech platform that processed microloans for underserved communities. The pitch was compelling, the mission sounded noble, the money was real. What nobody outside the company knew was that the platform's growth numbers were inflated by a network of shell accounts his operations manager had been running since month 4. The investors did not know. The community partners did not know. The press, who called Colton a visionary disruptor and put his face on 3 regional magazine covers, certainly did not know. Nahtales was finishing her bar exam prep when the first round of expansion capital hit. She noticed the numbers did not track. She asked questions. Colton told her she did not understand the industry. She understood it better than he wanted her to. By 34, Colton's platform had attracted a second funding round, $8 million, backed by a venture firm connected to a real estate developer named Prescott Lane, who had a media company on the side, and a taste for attaching himself to rising Black entrepreneurs whose narratives he could monetize. Prescott introduced Colton to a woman named Fiona Hale. Fiona was blonde, loud in exactly the right rooms, and had 1.4 million followers on social media. She wore Colton's brand like jewelry. She photographed well. She was, in Prescott's words, the upgrade the market was looking for. Colton left Nahtales on a Tuesday. The voice note was 47 seconds long. He said their marriage had run its course. He said he had grown in directions that required a different kind of partnership. He said he hoped she would understand. He did not say Fiona's name, but Nahtales had already found the Instagram post a photo of the 2 of them at a rooftop event in Miami, time-stamped 6 weeks earlier, captioned, "Building something real." Nahtales sat in that furnished apartment for 1 hour and did not cry. Then she got up, made herself coffee, opened her laptop, and pulled up the Ohio bar exam registration page. She had work to do. If you are watching this and feeling every word of what this woman survived, stay right here, because this story is not even close to over. Before we go further, if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, please do it right now. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like so this story reaches more people who need to hear it. And drop your country in the comments below. We love knowing where in the world our Nahtales family is watching from. Now let's get back to Colton, because his empire was about to start cracking. The years between 35 and 39 were Colton's golden window. Fiona brought him visibility he had never touched before. Joint appearances, brand partnerships, a docuseries that followed his entrepreneurial journey. Prescott Lane's media arm packaged him as the face of the new Black excellence aspirational, polished, photographed in penthouses and private aviation lounges. What the cameras never showed was the back end. To maintain the life that sold the brand, Colton had taken on layered debt that would have alarmed any sober accountant. The penthouse in Chicago was rented under a corporate shell. The car fleet was leased through a subsidiary. The jewelry Fiona wore on magazine covers was borrowed from a jeweler Colton owed $240,000. The speaking fees and licensing deals that appeared in every profile piece had actually dried up by mid-2024, as investors grew cautious, and two of his community lending partnerships pulled out after an internal audit raised red flags about disbursement records. By early 2026, the venture capital had stopped entirely. Prescott Lane, sensing the shift, quietly pulled his media company's support without a phone call. Fiona's posting about Colton slowed, then stopped. By March of that year, she had scrubbed his name from her bio and was photographed at a gallery opening with a tech executive from Seattle. The predatory lenders Colton had turned to in desperation, the ones charging rates that compounded faster than any platform revenue could keep up with, began filing notices. In April 2026, a class action suit was filed by 43 investors who alleged that the fintech platform's core growth metrics had been fabricated from the beginning. The filing pulled in transaction records, internal communications, and a deposition from the former operations manager who had been quietly building a cooperation deal with the government for 2 years. The federal bankruptcy filing came 6 weeks later. It was public record, every line of it. And somewhere in the Northern District of Ohio, a federal judge was assigned to the case, a woman who had spent the last 9 years building one of the most rigorous records on the bench for complex financial litigation. A woman who had passed the bar on her first attempt, clerked for a circuit court judge, joined a white shoe firm, then left it to work in federal prosecution before accepting a judicial appointment at 41. A woman who knew exactly what inflated numbers looked like, because she had tried to tell someone about them once and been told she did not understand the industry. Back in that courtroom, the hearing had been underway for 40 minutes. Colton's attorney argued for a restructured repayment plan, citing his client's community contributions and professional reputation. It was a reasonable argument. It was the kind of argument that worked in rooms where nobody had personal knowledge of how that reputation had been built. Judge Obi let the attorney finish. Then she opened a secondary file, one Colton had not seen before, that had been submitted by the plaintiff's legal team 2 days earlier. A forensic accounting report tracking 17 assets Colton's bankruptcy petition listed as belonging to Fiona Hale, personally a condo in Atlanta, 2 vehicles, a storage unit in Buckhead containing furniture, art, and a safe with $340,000 in undeclared cash. Nahtales read the asset list into the record without expression. The condo in Atlanta, purchased with funds traceable to the platform's second investment round. The vehicles, registered in Fiona's name 3 weeks before the first creditor notice arrived. The storage unit opened under a shell entity, but the access logs showed Colton's fingerprint on the digital entry system from a visit 6 days before the bankruptcy was filed. His attorney objected. Nahtales sustained nothing. She asked a single question, looking directly at Colton across the room. Were you aware that transferring assets to a third party within 90 days of a bankruptcy filing constitutes fraudulent conveyance under federal law? The silence lasted 4 seconds. His attorney started to respond. Nahtales held up one hand, not dramatically, just firmly, and waited. Colton said yes. He was aware. What he could not say What he could not get out of his own mouth in front of her, the woman who had sat in parking lots reading case law while he shook hands inside, was that he had not believed she would ever be on the other side of anything that mattered to him. That was the final miscalculation of a man who had spent his whole life undervaluing the wrong people. We are at the moment you have been waiting for, and if this story is waking something up in you, right now is the time to subscribe to Nahtales, so you never miss an ending like this one. Hit subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from tonight. Every single location comment means the world to us. Now let's see what Judge Obi with what she has in front of her. The ruling came down on a Thursday afternoon. Nahtales ordered the full liquidation of Colton's remaining personal assets, including the watch he had worn into that courtroom, which was traced to a purchase made with platform funds. She ordered the Atlanta condo seized and placed into the creditor restitution pool. She signed the order compelling Fiona Hale to appear for a separate deposition regarding the asset transfers. The restructured repayment plan was denied. The 43 investors were placed in the creditor queue with priority standing. Colton Vale was declared legally bankrupt, stripped of all associated corporate entities, and flagged for referral to federal prosecutors for further review of the fraudulent conveyance finding. He walked out of that courtroom with his attorney, past the reporters who had gotten wind of the filing and were waiting on the steps, past the cameras, past the story already assembling itself in real time. His collar was still straight, the cufflinks were still there, but the watch was gone, collected by a court officer before he left the building. Nahtales did not watch him leave. She had other cases. She had built something he never photographed, never featured, never credited, the kind of foundation that does not make good content, but holds weight across decades. The bar exam, the clerkship, the prosecution years, the bench. Brick by quiet brick, in the time he spent performing a life he could not afford, she had built a real one. She had not done it for this moment. She had done it because she refused to let his departure be the last word written about her worth. She had done it because the work was real, and she had always known the difference between what is real and what is performed. But if the universe had a sense of proportion, and on this particular Thursday, in this particular courtroom, it seemed like it did, then there was a kind of justice in the fact that the last signature Colton Vale's name would carry in a federal court was not his own. It was hers. 37 words, written in precise judicial language, ending an empire built on borrowed time and the belief that the people you leave behind will stay behind. Nahtales Obi set down her pen, closed the file, and stood. The bailiff called the room to rise. She walked out without looking back, the way a woman walks when she has always known exactly where she is going. Outside, on the courthouse steps, a reporter pushed a microphone toward Colton and asked if he had any comment on the ruling. He stood there for a moment in the gray afternoon light, no team behind him, no Prescott Lane feeding him talking points through an earpiece, no Fiona at his elbow for the frame, just a man in an expensive suit that now belonged technically to a creditor pool, blinking at a camera that no longer owed him anything. He said he planned to appeal. The reporter nodded and moved on. That was the last time Colton Vale's name appeared in a news cycle. Not the last time a story was written about what he had done. Those kept coming. Slow and thorough, the way accountability always moves when it finally gets moving. But the last time anyone thought his response was worth leading with. Nahtales' name started appearing in different articles that fall. A profile in a legal journal about her record in complex financial litigation. A mention in a piece about federal judges who had handled landmark bankruptcy fraud cases in 2026. A short interview she gave to a podcast run by 3 young black women who were pre-law, in which she said the most important thing she had ever learned was that no one can hollow you out unless you hand them the chisel. She did not mention Colton by name. She never needed to. The story had already told itself. And that is the story of the man who traded loyalty for a brand deal, and the woman who turned survival into a verdict. If this story moved you, if it made you think about every person who was ever underestimated, overlooked, or left behind, and still chose to build anyway, subscribe to Nahtales right now. Hit that notification bell, leave a like, and drop your country in the comments below. We want to know where in the world you are watching from, because our family is global, and every single one of you belongs here. New stories drop every week, and trust us, you do not want to miss what is coming next.